Welcome back to Populous Podcast, guys. I'm Chase Bailey. Today, we're joined by a very special guest, the one and only Mr. Anthony Clark. He's running to represent the 7th District of Illinois. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, where you came from, why you're running?
Sure, definitely. So essentially, I was born and raised in the 7th Congressional District. My parents are from the south side of Chicago. They moved to Oak Park, Illinois when I was 5 years old to provide me with greater opportunity and greater access to opportunity throughout the community. My mother, Ron and Blanche, extremely hardworking individuals. They instilled that in me, hard work, the importance and value of giving back to others, utilizing whatever privilege you have and influence you have to empower and work with others. And that move was extremely eye-opening to me, even at a young age, because I immediately saw the disparities that existed between communities, how you could literally cross the street, change your area code or zip code, and everything changes, in regard to infrastructure investment, the health of our schools, and just overall opportunity. So that was interesting to me growing up, consistently experiencing that, going to visit family, going to visit friends, or just engaging in life and seeing things change based upon, a block, a neighborhood, the amount of property taxes that are being fed into a school system and leadership. So the 7th has been part of my life for a long time. I bleed the 7th. I fight for the 7th. So just to sum it up, I graduated from a high school within the 7th Congressional District. From there, spent 6 years active duty in the United States Air Force. I was a survivor of gun violence, so I'm a disabled veteran. I was medically discharged in 2009. From there, I went through the Troops to Teachers program, and I taught at various levels within the 7th Congressional District at a special education teacher, high school level. So I taught in alternative school, a charter school, CPS school during our strike year, and now I'm back at Oak Park River Forest High School teaching. So going on 10 years of teaching. I founded and run a nonprofit that started in 2016. Prior to our new president that's in office, I just felt the issues that we were facing, they were pervasive, extremely nuanced, and we needed to address equity and equality within our community. So Suburban Unity Alliance is our nonprofit. And thanks to the support of the community, we've been able to do, some wonderful work, whether in regard to helping immigrant populations, individuals in regard to schooling affordability, financial literacy, protection and safety from white supremacist organizations. So we're everywhere, helping small businesses, supporting unions. We've done it all, helping survivors of sex trafficking. So it's been powerful, the things we've been able to do. But it got to a point where I felt, just running a nonprofit and teaching, I wasn't necessarily helping to change anything on a systemic level. I wasn't necessarily addressing root causes. And it just so happened around that time period, I was nominated to run for Congress in 2018 with brand new Congress and Justice Democrats. So I ran alongside some wonderful individuals like Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Many of you, if you've seen Knock Down the House, the documentary, Cori Bush, Paula Jean, Amy Villela. So many wonderful individuals. And, we had that experience, and I determined that running, because I never saw myself as a politician, I still don't, but having the ability to run provided me with an opportunity, again, I say that word a lot, but to take the issues that we were dealing with on a micro level and just treating symptoms and to magnify them to the macro and change systems in a sense by attacking root causes. And the only way I believe we can do that is through policy changes, through legislative changes, and, through changing, hopefully, the hearts and minds of many Americans.
Yeah, I agree completely on that one. So we'll get into your specific policy by policies later, but first off, I'd just like to get at the you're running against incumbent Democrat Danny Davis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So is there something you feel that he's doing or not doing that warrants a primary
Yeah, definitely.
challenger?
Definitely. That's a great question. And to anybody wondering why primary a long-term, Democratic representative, I believe that the incumbent is part of the establishment. And I think it's a clear difference between someone who passively maintains status quo and just essentially does enough and someone who is actively engaged and actively fighting for change. I think it's a clear difference. Incumbents like Danny K. Davis, they essentially survive off of that. Well, they vote the right way. But if we recognize in 2019, we've gotten to this point because essentially, voting or, verbally expressing support of something does not necessarily mean once someone gets into office or once someone has a position that they're going to actually fight to pass it, if that makes sense, or actually fight for it and fight to change the hearts and minds of individuals within communities. So the seventh, we have a 16.4% unemployment rate. That's 4 times the national average. School closures, mental health facility closures. Austin community was the largest community, but now they're the second largest within the seventh because individuals in the state and local levels are moving out of Illinois or moving out of Chicago just due to the lack of job opportunity, food deserts, high crime, pervasive gun violence that exists. So in my mind, as someone who's boots to the ground and works with and collaborates with so many wonderful individuals and organizations, we need more. We cannot simply afford to have a representative that states, well, things are the way they are. I said I would vote for it. I said I would sponsor it or co-sponsor it, or, I said you would have my support. But what are actions saying? Are they boots to the ground, actively trying to build coalitions and bridges and making demands? Because when you're trying to push individuals to the left, when you want progress, that goes beyond simple words. You truly have to be active. And I think we've seen that, and I'll end it here. Look how the Green New Deal immediately, once new representation got into office, like, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Our Democratic establishment, the Republican Party, so on and so forth, we've known the climate has been an issue for years and years. But it took fresh faces, fresh ideas, fresh energy getting to office and really championing those ideals. And we see the DCCC responding, trying to marginalize the issue. They don't want to have debates in regards to climate, but it's an existential crisis. So I think that's a perfect example of the difference between simply sitting back and, oh, yeah, I'll support the Green New Deal. Why haven't you pushed for, or why didn't you create, something along the lines of the Green New Deal in the past decades? The climate is nothing new. So it's just a clear difference between passively maintaining status quo and actively pushing for change.
And on the topic of the Green New Deal, that's going to be a huge one for 2020 and years to come. So with that impending, inexorable, apocalyptic change that this climate issue is bringing, how would you attack that? How would you personally take that on?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm playing an active role right now. I'm working with and collaborating with Sunrise Movement Chicago. Wonderful, wonderful leaders, at the collegiate level and beyond. They're really taking the lead. And I'm simply utilizing my platform and whatever influence I have to support. So that's going to meetings, communicating, spreading the messaging, going to rallies. We'll be headed to Detroit soon, to continue to mobilize. So along those lines, again, not simply just signing a pledge online, but actually showing up, actually lending my body, actually lending my energy. And if we understand, no other fight can be won without our climate, without our environment. So I think, the Green New Deal and addressing climate change is the number one issue alongside of taking money out of politics, because, again, we've gotten to this point where our climate has been ignored, where it's become an existential crisis because forever and ever and ever, corporations, the top 1% in leadership, they always place profit in a capitalistic society before the people. So again, we signed the no fossil fuel money pledge. We attend our meetings. We mobilize on the ground with, Sunrise Movement, pushing for the Green New Deal. But it's also taking that macro level issue, in regards to the climate, and then bringing it down to the local level within the 7th Congressional District and communicating, intersectionally of how climate issues impact on the ground. Because sometimes, you have individuals within our community, they don't have time to think about the Green New Deal at times. They don't have time to think about, the global issue of the environment because they're simply waking up trying to survive the day. We mentioned gun violence earlier. We mentioned food deserts. We mentioned lack of job opportunities and a lack of a living wage. So homelessness is a pervasive issue. Mental health is a pervasive issue. So people are just trying to live day to day. So one of my roles, again, as a leader, as somebody who wants to be a representative of the people, is going out, door knocking and connecting with the people and communicating to them how, Black and brown and poor individuals in their communities only produce, 10 to 20% of our pollution emissions, but they're being impacted by 40 to 50% of the pollution, whether it's in regards to the lead that's in our water, the lead that's in our paint, the pollution that we're inhaling. It goes on, and it's such a pervasive issue. So I think that's one of my primary roles as well, is articulating at a micro level, boots to the ground, why it's important for all of us to build diverse coalitions behind the Green New Deal, because it impacts us on the ground as well.
Yes, sir. And you've consistently talked about you're from a largely minority district, correct?
Correct. The 7th Congressional District has over 700,000 community members, over 400,000 registered voters, and it's primarily made up of, Black African American residents, but, it is extremely diverse based upon gerrymandering. It goes all the way from, say, Inglewood to downtown Chicago and all the way through western suburbs into Hillside, Illinois. So it's an extremely diverse district, yes.
All right. And with that, I'd like to move on to the topic of the drug war. I know that's one of the things you've talked about, and you're vehemently opposed. So I would just like to know, with 13.4% of the population being made up of Black or African American individuals, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, and yet they're, despite using illicit substances at a similar rate to white people, they're imprisoned at the state level at a 6-to-1 ratio. So seeing this disparity, and like with the crack versus cocaine minimum sentencing.
Guidelines, yes. No, that's great, and I'm glad you've been doing your research and understand the issues that exist. And I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but as a teacher, I think it's important that I share my beliefs and make an I statement. After the end of slavery, we're coming up on June 19th. June 19th is when many of us celebrate the emancipation, because there were still slaves in Texas. Slave owners were still housing and owning slaves even after the emancipation. So the North had to send troops in to actually free the last of, I guess, legal slaves in a sense. But we have to understand, after slavery ended, the issue did not end. I guess our government, in a sense, the capitalistic society essentially shifted to slavery by another name. Our prison industrial complex, sharecropping, so on and so forth, Jim Crow laws. How do you keep a group of individuals disempowered? Is through incarceration, is through high debt, and so on and so forth. So we have to look at our prison industry as it is, whether we talk about the war on drugs or the 1994 crime bill. These legislations disproportionately impact Black and brown and poor communities. They break up and destroy families. I know individuals that have been held at 26 in California over $20, $30, our cash bail system. It is all designed to maintain oppression, in my estimation. So that's why it's extremely important that we address this war on drugs, end it, because, again, now we're talking about the opioid epidemic. Yes, I care about all people, and the opioid epidemic is extremely troubling, and we have to address it. But notice how the media, locally and nationally, didn't really start talking about these issues until it predominantly started impacting, or not predominantly, but started impacting, middle class and upper middle class white families as well. But there have been opioid and drug epidemics within Black and brown communities for decades and decades. Individuals facing them similar issues, being incarcerated for nonviolent, low-level drug offenses and wallowing in prison. Again, the breakup of family, the inability to maintain employment, but yet they're being employed within prisons, making cents upon the dollar to make profit for these private prison industries. So it's a huge issue. So if we're truly for empowering, oppressed communities, we have to end the war on drugs. I think history has shown us that reactive and prohibitive measures never work. This is a public health crisis, and we need to be proactive, and we need to be holistic as communities and truly support individuals that are impacted by, drug abuse, addiction, so on and so forth. And furthermore, we have to identify the interconnected issues of why someone may actually sell drugs, the discriminatory practices and ideologies that exist within regulatory industries. I know so many former students of mine that have honestly sold drugs to simply provide for their family. Again, they're within an area that lacks opportunity, and oftentimes they believe that that's their only option. So we have to address the interconnected issues and root causes that lead to drug abuse and drug addiction, and that includes poverty, homelessness, mental health issues, violence, and so on and so forth.